Good evening, friends. Welcome to the episode 10 of Career Shifts podcast. I'm your host, Gopal, and I'm super excited for this episode since it's episode 10 on the 10th. So 10 on 10, isn't it? For those who have been here before, you know this already, but for those who are joining us for the first time, Career Shifts is a podcast where we explore the journeys of people who have successfully navigated significant career shifts. Before we dive into today's episode, like always, I want to continue our tradition of starting the show with a story. When I met Abhijit in January this year, he gifted me the book Career 3.0. It was a special moment. The book cover has a quote by Professor Haigreva Rao, a must read guide on how to reinvent yourself and future proof yourself. As you all know, the Career Shifts podcast is all about stories of reinvention as well. As I read it, it took me back in time. And since today is the 10th, the story is also from my 10th grade. As a young 15-year-old boy, we were all curious as what the teenagers would always be. One of the favorite teachers decided not to take class one day and spend time instead on asking us the question, what do you want to become? One by one, each of us stood up and said what we wanted to become. I probably said something, but I'm 100% sure that's not what I'm doing today. And in fact, I'm doing something totally different than what I had imagined. As young kids, we're often asked this question of what we want to become, if becoming is a destination, but that's not how it is. In today's day and age, becoming is not a destination, but a journey. I'm reminded of a famous quote by a very special person whom we unfortunately lost due to COVID, Mali Mahalingam. He kept telling me, Gopal, in life, we don't arrive, we keep arriving. My guest on the show today is one such person who keeps arriving every single day, creating benchmarks and breaking old ones, making it a tad bit harder for each one of us to cross. Abhijit Bhaduri is truly living by his philosophy. He continuously sets new goals, achieves them, inspiring all of us to do the same as well. One of the reasons why this Career Shifts podcast is a reality today is him. Abhijit is an author, blogger, LinkedIn top voice, a podcast host who wears many hats. Today, we will explore his journey and the energy that fuels many passions that he has. So, without further ado, let's dive into episode 10 with Abhijit Bhaduri. Enjoy the show. Abhijit, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me, Gopal. What a lovely story to begin with. What a lovely story.
Thank you so much. Before we start the show, do you have any starting comments that you would like to share with the audience?
No, I think I completely resonated with the story that you shared. That we think about our career in terms of a destination. What do you want to be, as if it's going to end there. So no matter what you have been or what you become, your identity continuously evolves. So I think you think about it as something that will keep evolving, whether you consciously do it or you don't do it. And there will be moments when it's a bit like when you go on a journey. Even though you kind of, when you map it out, you want to go from Delhi to Hyderabad or whatever be the destination. What happens is we think about it as a straight line. Actually, there are so many twists and turns. So you get onto the highway, sometimes you take a side road, sometimes you do that. So your career is actually your journey through life. So that's, I think, the way to look at it. That's how I think about that.
Wonderful. So, with that, I think it really gives me an opportunity to get into your career journey.
Hmm.
You started your career as from being an Exceller to earning an LLB, and your early days in Tata Steel, leading learning and development for organizations like PepsiCo, Wipro, Microsoft, and now in your new role as top talent management advisor. Could you walk the audience through what were some key pivotal moments as you want to reflect upon and share with us?
The first thing is that, I think it took me a little while to really discover what exactly is the kind of work that I get energized by and what I can learn and start getting better at. So, I think when you start to think about your career as what do you want to get better at, so for me, it was uh, getting intrigued by this whole question. So I was curious about, why do so many people, when they start from the same starting place, where do they end up differently? What happens and what creates those opportunities for people? So I think that was the starting point. So when it was really in the early days, I kind of tried doing a generalist role, and of all those things, I think I enjoyed this whole business of developing people and sort of really understanding this whole process, because it's also a process of devoting some time to improving your own self. Because if you are going to sort of work in this space, you begin to understand that your career opportunities don't really happen only by the degree that you have. It builds on the skills that you have, the kind of outputs that you've delivered, the way you've learned new things, the way you've helped people along the way. So it's a fairly complex equation, and that's really what intrigued me. So everybody who started with you in the same class doesn't end up in the same spot. Everybody who you worked with in one organization doesn't end up in the same spot. So why do people's career journeys differ? So that's been the curiosity that has stayed with me right through.
Wonderful. And I'm sure there is a lot more that we will discover about being curious and why is it important. But for all of you on the show listening to this one, please do share in your thoughts, comments, questions for Abhijit. Tell us which city are you joining us from. It will just make the conversation a lot more engaging. So the next question that I have for you, Abhijit, is more on the times that we are living in right now. We kind of are going through an extremely interesting time, good in many ways because there is a lot of tech advancements that are happening, but also not so good because it is leading into a lot of anxiety, confusion in people, mainly also employers, to be able to figure out if what would this lead to in terms of jobs. There are some interesting stats that people would keep quoting. One is, of course, we are facing from a fresher hiring standpoint the lowest ever hiring. It's kind of bottomed out in terms of unprecedented levels. Now, it could be because of shift in career, shift in skills requirements, or it could also be geopolitics, as some say. Um, there are also a lot of chatter or conversations and concerns about the fact that even people from IITs and IIMs are finding it very difficult to get placed. On the other hand, people who are in mid careers are also facing a similar challenge. While on one hand, people who have jobs finding it hard to retain, people who are not in jobs finding it hard to get jobs. What in your view is um, uh, I mean, what created this situation? And do you have any advice for people to kind of be successful, coming out with success out of the situation?
I think that's a great starter. So if you think about this whole notion of where do career opportunities come from, fundamentally
Hmm.
there are three aspects to it. One is, which in my book Career 3.0, I begin with that whole conversation that you think about work. Hi, thank you. So you start to think about work that gets done. So all of us, we do some kind of work. So
Yeah.
somebody could be a doctor or an engineer. So specifically, then if I say that I'm an engineer, then you want to know what kind of engineering. So are you a coder? Are you a civil engineer? Are you an electrical engineer? So what kind of work? And then as you get drilled down specifically into that, so when I say that I am a coder, that's what I do. Then in which case you want to know the second aspect of it, which is what kind of skills do you have. So then you would say, what kind of coding do you do? So I can talk about, so I have enjoyed developing applications for the iPhone, or I have enjoyed developing healthcare systems. I have enjoyed developing things for space. So which is actually talking about the kind of skills that I have built. So that would mean I have some project management skills, I have some coding skills, and I have some capacity to work in teams. I can work with customers. So those are the skills package. So first is you start with the work that you do, then you think about the skills that you build, and when you have work and the skills both come together in the marketplace, which is, when it comes to jobs, that becomes the employer. So the employer brings the work together. So this is what this company is doing, this is what the person is bringing into the workplace, and this is what gets people together. So when these collide, that is when you begin to see that this is what your career is all about. Yeah. So you become then a coder for X company. So in my case, I was leading learning and development. That's the work that I was doing, is actually about upskilling people, because there is a new kind of technology which is artificial intelligence, and Microsoft was at the lead of that. And so it gave me an opportunity to help the business really strategize how would you create opportunities for people inside the organization, change their skill base, because that's the only way that you create opportunities. So the work that I was doing was about upskilling. The skills that I have is in, being able to consult, being able to understand how skills get built, being able to craft the story and the narrative to sort of make it interesting for people to learn things. And then through the coaching piece that I do, I help people build the confidence in the fact that you have the skill. So you build the confidence in the skill, and that's how you make people successful. So the entire concept of shift that we see is that there is a change in the way business models have traditionally worked and now the way they are going to work. So this is therefore a pivotal moment when all those jobs are disappearing, but it'll create new career opportunities. So I think the first takeaway, I would sort of say the first big takeaway, is that you have to stop thinking of your work in terms of jobs. Jobs are going to start diminishing, but work will be in plenty, which means that the work that I do of designing, learning opportunities and upskilling opportunities for organizations, that is going to continue, because every business, any mid-sized business that I sort of work with, does not have necessarily a talent management system. So the opportunity I have is, how do I find that organization's challenge of building a talent management system and help them? So this is the way that work will keep happening. And then you kind of say that it can also happen with individuals. Then you kind of think that, okay, a lot of people who are starting off, you were saying that when people start their own businesses, very often they struggle with that because they don't have the skill of articulating their personal brand. So if I can help them do that, that's another kind of work. So if you see, the work could be multiple kinds, right? And that will keep growing. I can help people do not just one thing, but hundreds of things. I can help organizations do not just one thing, but hundreds of things. So the opportunities, the moment you start thinking of jobs, that's going to diminish, but work is going to exponentially grow. So the opportunities will grow dramatically.
Wonderful point, Abhijit, and it kind of allows me to reflect on a particular point, which is a trend that I see these days, and this comes through a lot of coaching conversations that I do myself as well. Um, Following are the themes that I keep hearing. One, we keep applying for jobs we don't get to hear.
Hmm.
Two, we don't know where to look for jobs. We are there on LinkedIn and other job portals, but yeah, we just go there to take a look at what's available, keep applying for jobs, and come back. From that and the context that you shared, which is we have to stop looking at jobs as jobs, but what we need to do, and there is enough and more work to do. How would someone who is in his mid career bring in a shift in his perspective or her perspective about looking at opportunities differently? What should shift internally to look at opportunities more broader than what they have been looking at? And where is the whole personal branding presence coming into picture? If you have any thoughts on that.
So I think when people, think about LinkedIn as a place where you are going to find the opportunity, so that's one way to frame it. And everybody who's there, LinkedIn now has a billion people. So
Correct.
each time a new person joins LinkedIn, your opportunity to stand out in that crowd diminishes, because
Correct.
so let's say if LinkedIn had only two of us, I have a 50% chance of doing it. But now LinkedIn has a billion people, so therefore it is that much harder for somebody to sort of get noticed out
True
there.
that.
So the only way you do it is by sort of really telling people what is it that you can do which creates value for them. Yeah. So if I say that I can help you build your personal brand, um, that's a kind of work that I can do for you. So then that
Correct.
can create the opportunity for me. So that's the first one, is to sort of really be very sharp focused in terms of what is the work that you can do for somebody else, not just this is what I enjoy doing. I
Hmm.
enjoy, many different things. I enjoy watching movies, but nobody's going to pay me for that, right? So we have
Unless
to
you're a
stop,
movie reviewer.
which is different. And there are enough people who think that your movie reviews offer something of value to them, therefore they will read your reviews. And
Sure.
if that creates enough traction, then potentially a magazine will employ you, or a website will employ you, or your own website will get enough traction for that. So I think
Correct.
the way to sort of really start thinking about this whole place is that I think not enough people really start to look at what is it that they are doing which can actually start to add value to others. Your career is not going to be based on what I want to do or can do or I enjoy doing. It's about what do others find value in working with you. Two,
Hmm.
if you can create the value, the second thing that helps is how do you sort of differentiate yourself, which is really the personal branding space. And so, I recently did a column for, what I write for Times of India. So I wrote about how do you become a storyteller of your profession. So, for
Hmm.
example, if, for every profession, there are a couple of people who become iconic. They are the
Hmm.
storytellers of the profession. So if you kind of say that, the moment you start to think about, imagine if you got to learn physics from, say, someone of the caliber of, Einstein, or you
Hmm.
learn to play football from one of the superstars, so Messi
Hmm.
or Ronaldo. And
Hmm.
when you do that, these people are the storytellers of their profession. They're not only really, really good at what they do, but they also inspire others to get attracted to the profession.
Correct.
So that's what, you can be, that icon of the profession. Once you become that, the opportunities find you rather than you looking for opportunities. It's always much tougher to look for opportunities, because then you're among the one in billion people, even if it's not everybody who's there is not competing with you. But let's say even if there are 20 people on LinkedIn who have the same qualifications, how are you different? And therefore, the opportunity for somebody to come and work with you is only if they know that this is who I'm looking for. So you have to make it easy for the other person to find you. So that, I think, is the two-step formula. So be really good at what you are doing. So build that skill. Be very clear about what you do. And two is to actually articulate it really well in whatever you are communicating that with. Pretty much, think about what you are doing. Gopal, your podcast is such a lovely
Hmm.
conversation about you're helping people, to really start thinking about their career in a very unique way. So
True.
you are actually through this podcast creating value for people, which is why they're joining you. So, that's the opportunity.
Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. And I think it's very important for people to really reflect on what they're good at, what they can do differently, and create a brand around that, which is a very good insight. We have quite a few people on this podcast today, a lot of people joining from Bangalore, Hyderabad. So, hello to everyone.
Hello from
Dear
Seattle.
friend, hello from Seattle, yes. Dear friend Vikas says, a masterclass by Abhijit. Thanks to our very own Gopal. Thank you, Vikas. Thank you for joining. People who are there on this, please feel free to drop in your questions, thoughts, comments. We'll be taking them one by one. Um, Abhijit, you made a very interesting point on how individuals should start to look at jobs differently, um, and probably look at kind of work. Now, doesn't it also mean that the organization should start looking at jobs differently and not go by the traditional job descriptions that they typically would go through? And are we equipping managers, leaders, business leaders, HR well enough to be able to look at talent differently today? What do you see? I mean, is there a disconnect, and should something be done about bridging that gap?
Well, what has happened is historically organizations, and you referred in some sense to why are organizations not hiring enough freshers, or why are
Yeah,
they making changes in the
yeah.
mid levels or senior levels or whatever. So this shifting of that we see, fewer people getting employed, fewer people, and lots of people getting laid off. That combination is a thing that is here to stay. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, imagine that if you did, let's say, four kinds of work, when you're a coder, as I said, that you are doing one kind of work, which is you're writing the code. Two, you are making sure that it sort of, you are able to understand the UX element of it. So that's one kind of work. Then you are also able to talk to the customer and explain, and when you are implementing the code, you are able to solve the problem. So when the customer sort of does that, that's something that you are able to identify. Okay, the customer needs this kind of work. Let's imagine these are the three kinds of things that you are doing. So the important thing to look at is, can this work, what you are doing? Will it get done better by, let's say, the generative AI process? So generative
Hmm.
AI can write code. The moment you kind of do that, now there's a slight shift in skill. So
Hmm.
I don't need you to write the code, but I need you to supervise the code. So do you see that there is a shift in that skill which is required? So people who are only good at writing the code are not going to be needed. So now you can, instead of having, let's say, a business which had 20 coders, is now going to need maybe 15. So five people will go. Yeah. So that's going to continuously happen. So the skill now is not just in writing code, but the skill now is in the human interaction. So as technology increases and improves, if you see my last newsletter on LinkedIn, I talk about that as, this entire process, that how do you start to make your skills continuously more human, which means being able to articulate your ideas. And if you've grown up with this mindset that I'm going to do my work, and I don't believe in blowing my trumpet. I mean, people have really mistaken notions about what personal branding is all about. Or that,
True.
I'm just going to do my work, and I'm not going to go and tell anybody.
Yeah.
I'm not going to suck up to my boss. And there were hundreds of these myths that we've always been told, that if you work well with others, oh, this person spends
Hmm.
more time chatting
On
rather than
LinkedIn.
doing the work.
Hmm.
This whole mindset is what becomes a barrier when people go out on their own. So now the nature of work has shifted. So now you're actually going to look for people who are good at working with people. But if I've
True.
never worked with you, I don't engage with people, I have no way of I don't know anybody from another organization. These are all serious limitations that prevent people from actually finding opportunities for themselves.
Very true. And I think one of the things that has happened as a result of COVID was the fact that we learned how to work virtually and create more relations across the borders, and probably even in India use that to our advantage. But one of the flip sides, unfortunately, is the fact that we have an entire generation of workforce that has come into work with very limited physical interaction, and it's kind of hurting them even more on, I mean, without really dwelling deeper into it. But that's a fact. I think people are struggling to be able to create meaningful conversations. So uh, I think it's interesting to see how things will evolve from here on, and I really hope people do take some of these advice seriously and work towards making it happen for themselves. Some really interesting comments coming in. I'm going to take a question from Vivek Saha. How do you see courage playing an important mindset while crafting careers?
Oh, what a fabulous question. Thank you, Vivek. Um, I think the when you look at courage comes from two elements. One is the humility to know that you are never 100% ready for any role that you do, because the roles keep evolving. So so think about your skill level is pretty much like chasing the horizon, that what you do will you'll need to keep improving. So that's one part of it. But if you only have that humility that I don't know enough, you will never start implementing it. So you also need courage to be able to start working, knowing fully well that in the initial days I will make mistakes. I'm not going to be as good, but I'll keep improving and do multiple iterations of doing that. So put it in context, when I used to drive when I was working in India, and when I moved to US, you drive on the other side of the road. So
Yeah.
even though I knew driving, which means I had the skill, I didn't have the confidence and courage to be able to drive on this side, because I was always afraid that what if I kind of make a mistake? And there were initial days when I did. So I sort of, had to take driving lessons and so do that, which is the importance of continuous skill building. When you are looking at that process, you are able to take what you've already learned, build on that, and then apply it into a completely different context. So the opportunities keep evolving, and the only way you are going to do that is to have the courage to be able to say, it's okay, I may fail once or twice, but despite the setback, I'm going to pick myself up. So if you don't have that belief that no matter what the setback is, as you're trying something in a new context, you will never pick yourself up. So I think it's a combination. Courage comes from your belief that I will deal with it. So that's the confidence that you can do it. But courage is also about the fact that, yeah, I will fail, it's going to hurt, and I will live with it. I will build that capability. So it's a combination of multiple things.
Very well said. Mona Pujna says, indeed, great initiative. Thank you, Gopal Iyer and Abhijit, for your guidance. It's a valuable session. Thank you, Mona. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Sukrit says, great insights by Abhijit and Gopal. It would indeed reinvention of careers. Absolutely. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is generative AI. We are going through an extremely, as I said, interesting times where, on one hand, the speed at which things are happening has significantly advanced because of generative AI. Yet, on the other hand, you have almost 95% of people in this world um, who have not embraced to that reality and have not made enough and more um, progress to be able to say, yes, I know that there is something called generative AI that exists, and I know how to use ChatGPT. I know how to use generative Gemini or the likes of it. What advice do you have for people who have not yet uh, jumped onto the bus because it's or the train that is moving already really fast? Is this something that is? I mean, if I can draw a parallel to it, it's like the 1980s when our parents were first introduced to computers, and they would like, yeah, no, computer to hमें नहीं करना है. We will not do it. We will continue to work with our book and pen. But then soon they realized that they had no other choice but to do it. Have you reached that stage of people not having choice to continue saying, yeah, I know about it, but I don't know enough about it to say it will have an impact on the career?
I think when you look at any technology, technology will keep evolving. I mean, you look at it, you know, the phone that you have today, chances are that this is not the phone that you started with, right?
Of course. Yeah.
The app that you use today is probably something that has been updated a couple of times in the last 2 3 months.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is a myth to say that we don't actually do it that well. We do, but what happens is when technology comes in, it creates new opportunities. I want to sort of share a small story about this entire thing that you know s- I think 2 3 years back, I was invited to talk to a set of photographers. This was one of the largest photography conferences in India. And you had speakers from all over the world coming in to speak there. And I thought it's a great opportunity for me to go and, you know, meet a different set of people because I'd never spoken to a specialist group like this.
True.
And as I did that, you know, I spoke about whatever I did, and then you know, people were showing their photographs. So obviously, when these are the master classes. When I looked at, so I walked into a room where this guy was showing the photographs, and I was stunned by how beautiful they are, and they're distinctly different. And I sort of, you know, this person came up and said, by the way, I liked your talk. And I said, your photographs are stunning. So he said, you can also take these photographs. And I said, yeah, if only I had that, you know, camera worth 20 lakhs. Yes, of course, I would also take those photographs. So he says, no, no, none of these are taken with any fancy camera. This is from the mobile phone. And he was, ironically, he had the
Wow.
exact same model of the mobile phone that I was carrying. So I said, what? How did you do this? And he said, so it's not about the phone. It is really about how do you use um, you know, all the features of the phone, and have you ever tried this setting? And he sort of showed me how you did that. And no, so I can't say it was a masterclass. I would have really loved to learn a lot more. And since then I have been reading about, you know, here are things. So I teach myself one or two little things about mobile phone photography, and therefore when I share something, I'm able to try out those little settings, the change of that, and then, you know, do something there. Those are some of the ways in which the same mobile phone can create opportunities, you know, for me. So tomorrow, and I have no interest in being a photographer, but certainly I like to use some of my photographs for you know, the work that I do, which is a lot of writing and speaking and all of that. And
Right.
those things become very powerful. The second aspect to think about is that when you look at the new technology, uh, it's okay if you don't use you probably don't use 100% of the features of your phone, but at the same time you have the phone. So the only way you will get to create those opportunities, if you try out those features, maybe try two features today and see but the important piece is instantly put it back into practice.
True.
So that's the one way in which you create opportunities, and you start becoming good. Opportunities find you.
Yeah. I think it's that phenomena, if I can say that, you can learn to swim by reading 100,000 books, but you don't really learn swimming unless you jump into the pool. And I think it's that fear that a lot of people have about, should I jump? Should I take this plunge into the world of AI or not? I think that's what probably is scaring a lot of them. But the whole idea is learn by doing. And I think it's very important for you
Absolutely.
to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to take one more question from Sakshi. How do you justify career transitions? HR professionals don't seem to understand the concept of transferable skills. They treat people with career shifts like freshers. How do you sell yourself in such a case? Wonderful question.
How do you justify? Let's take a couple of different questions built into this. How do
Yeah.
you justify career transitions? So I think career transitions are dependent on your identity shifts. You know, if you are comfortable shifting your identity. So, for example, if I say that so remember, I started by saying you have to first get clarity in your head about the work that you do. Because if you don't have that clarity, you could be doing 50 things. but
Mm.
what is the work that you do? So, for example, I can't say I am the chief learning officer of this company. What does that mean? And, so I have to really break it down in terms of the work that I can do for you. So the first thing
Mm.
is to frame yourself in that manner. So if I say I'm a HR professional, that has very limited value because, okay, so what do you do? Now, if I, the moment I say that I can help you find great talent, I have cleared the fog in some sense. Then, if I say that I'm really good at hiring Python developers, I've really sharp focused that entire thing. Or I can say that I have actually been able to get Python developers who have now delivered, what you see in this particular healthcare software. That's my work. Now you can show the entire thing, how your work has impacted the outcome. So I think the same thing happens with every career transition. You have to think about your skills, and you have to look at it in also in terms of a second lens, which is what is your identity in that, because every career description that you're talking about is a shift of your identity as well. And some of us are comfortable looking at ourselves in multiple lenses. So, for example, if I say that I'm a talent management professional, so I work with organizations, I work with individuals as a coach. So I have a talent management identity, yeah, where I work with with organizations. I have another identity as a executive coach for senior leaders, or for people who are going through career transition. So that's a second identity. The third identity could be that I'm a creator, that
Mm.
I host podcasts. It is. Now if people don't want to know what you're doing for you, they want to know what you're doing for them. So for example, if I say, even the creative work that I do, so I also host podcasts like you, and Gopal, you are doing this podcast. It's a way in which you will learn. You are also building your connection. You're also building your connection not just with me, but with many other people. So you think about it,
True.
what is the byproduct of that is a whole lot of benefits. But you don't start by saying, I'll do a podcast so that I can build connections with people I don't
Mm.
know. You never
Mm.
start doing that. You have to
No. Yeah.
build a podcast which creates value for others. That will, the benefits result for you.
Correct. Correct. True. I think. I mean, to just reflect upon the last part of the question on how do you sell yourself in that case. It's a factor of, again, the point that you made earlier, to build a story about what you do in terms of work, which will be of value to the organization. So I hope that helped Sakshi.
I'll add
With
one more little
Sure,
piece.
sure, please. Yeah.
Sometimes, I was talking about the whole notion of identity. So in my book, Career 3.0, I talk about an individual who was an English teacher, was going through a huge career transition because the ed tech company she used to teach English, and had shut down. And actually, what started to happen was, through the conversation that I had, I was actually trying to understand who comes to learn English from you. So she said, so I said, you teach grammar, which is, think about it, this is the work that she was doing. So I'm getting clarity about the work that she's doing. So she
Mm.
says, no, no, it's not just grammar, but when people learn to speak English, they feel more confident. I said, who gets confidence? Why do they need this confidence? So she talks about the fact that I sort of have a lot of people who join the classes because they want to get married to somebody who's working in an English speaking country, and therefore want to build the skill so that they can adapt very easily in that country. So when you think about it, to cut a long story short, I said, okay, so therefore you are really working as somebody who's a confidence coach.
Mm.
So the moment this person talks about herself as a confidence coach, she then is no longer just an English teacher, but is a confidence coach. And that created a career trajectory. And I urge you to read that particular experience. And that's a great way in which you shift your identity from being an English teacher to a confidence coach. And that creates the opportunity. So your skills and the work that you do together form your identity. And that's the way that you That's what creates confidence, that yes, this is who I am, and that's what you build as a brand.
Wonderful. So, for people who haven't read this book, it's a must buy, Career 3.0, available on Amazon. Please go and grab it. Wonderful
Thank you.
stories, good toolkits that will allow you to relook and reinvent your career as well. One question from our dear friend Vikas is, how do you see organizations evolving when it comes to skilling their staff?
Terrific. Thank you, Vikas. Always good to connect with you. And I think what organizations, so I can sort of let me share what I'm doing and where I see organizations working. Some of the things that organizations are now trying to sort of look at is uh, the work that we do is first trying to understand how is the landscape changing as far as business is concerned. Where do they see growth coming from? What are the possibilities? What are some of the barriers? When you sort of really have a fairly good understanding of the business scenario. So that's your first step, to be able to understand what's the business scenario. And then, in view of that, you kind of really look at who are some of the key players. And so, one of the things that when I work with the organizations, I always actually help the HR organization in that business to actually come together and say, what are some of the key skills? And for example, one of the organizations, a small mid-sized organization, what they do is, so they identified that the person who is sort of building the application platform is a key skill. So the way to identify the key skill is which person, if they left, these two, three, four people, if they left, you would have to really shut down your business, or you couldn't really, continue until you found somebody who's as good. That's a great question to start identifying. Where to start. You start with that. Eventually, do it for everybody, but where to start? You will discover that there are three or four really critical skills in the organization, and that's where you begin. And there you kind of see, what does this person really do? So most people say, oh, they code. Actually break it down into multiple things. So for example, as an HR person, you're not only doing, let's say, hiring, you're also helping them get onboarded. Maybe that's what you also do. But along with that, there are a whole lot of other things you are doing at the back end. You're working with the businesses to understand which skills they need, when do they need it, how do you do your sourcing strategy. So these are all the different tasks. Some of them can be automated, but the real magic is, yes, automation can do many different things, but you have to see where does it really add the most amount of value. For example, um, say any of this open AI software can also draw. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
really, so I don't really find great value in using that to draw, because I definitely think I can do better than that, because I can do a very specific kind of a cartoon or a very specific thing, and I can spend like 5 hours writing out that prompt. Can I do that? Yes, of course. But then it'll take me 20 minutes to draw that cartoon. So why would I not do that? So therefore, to say in my work, for example, it does not make sense for me to automate that process, right? But it may be a good idea for me to think of possibilities. So for example, I'm if I'm going to, I'm doing some work in Canada tomorrow. So when I go there, I'm asking people, what is the most photogenic spot on this particular route? And I get three spots. Then I say, why is it photogenic? So then it can help me plan my trip and that. So that's something I've automated. I don't need to now ask a travel agent or somebody. So those are ways. So really to start thinking, which part of the business can you automate? Three, once you do that, it changes the internal structure of the organization, because the work that somebody was doing at a point of time, you've taken 20% of that work out, automated it, but 80% of the work now has changed, that you need to spend way more time with the customers. That will require a set of skills to be deepened. So now you have a skilling agenda, and you also have a way of understanding here is how the person can grow in that organization. So you connect the skill with the career. So in that sense, it's you identify the business challenge, then you look at the critical skills, the skills that you the critical roles, you do the tasks that the people are doing, which part of the task gets automated, the most strategic value, how does that role change, and therefore how does the business reconfigure itself. So this is the four-step process that you would follow.
Yeah,
Five step,
I'm
actually,
sure.
you also link the career and the skill. So five step.
Correct, correct. I'm sure a lot of these are there in the book. So, people who haven't brought it, please do get it, grab a copy of that. Our dear friend Rushabh asks, and this is a topic which is very close to my heart, having worked in this domain for almost 3 years now, is how do you see gig economy shaping up in the field of HR and in India?
you know e- Eventually, if you sort of think about what I just said, the when we are saying you break down the tasks, what is the work that you do. So for example, don't tell me that you are an engineer, don't tell me that you are a doctor, but it's more helpful for me to understand, are you a surgeon, are you a isn't that the logical question that you ask? If
Correct.
I were to tell you, oh, I'm a AI ethicist. Okay, you have a vague idea what that could mean, but what do I do? That
Hmm.
question. So what people are really asking is, what are the tasks that you do? So I help the organization understand the ethical implications of collecting data.
Hmm.
Now you've got a little more clarity. That means I help the HR organization understand the ethics of managing employee data, and at
Hmm.
which stage which data need not be collected and which data goes to the employee, back to the employee when they leave the organization. So that's the ethics. And then the dilemmas for me are, does AI continue to get trained on data when the person has left the organization? So, what are the ethics of that? What is the good and bad? So I create those conversations. That means I must have the skill of engaging in those conversations. So that's a big skill advantage that I want to build for the organization. Now you have a great idea of, oh, okay, this is the kind of work I can also do. Or you can, if I'm a gig economy kind of a person, that I'm a person who works with many different organizations, I can now, you can really find a way to work with me on something like this, right? So the gig economy is really about sharpening and helping people understand, what do you do. Therefore, to and the challenge of when people are in organizations, there's a designation. That's the biggest
Yeah.
challenge. That you will have fancy designations. When I joined Wipro as the chief learning officer, people would ask me, "What is the role of a chief learning officer? I mean, what do you do?" So I would joke and say the one who needs to learn the most is the chief learning officer. But actually, now when you sort of, on a serious note, you really help the organization stay competitive by doing three things. What are the big changes that are happening in the business? How is that affecting the skills that the organization needs? And how do you build it in a shorter span of time than what the people could learn for themselves? Yeah, how do you shorten the learning curve? So that's really
Sure.
the work that the chief learning officer does, which is different from a training. So then the next question people would say, oh, this is a way of rebranding training. So it's not rebranding. Training is really about taking a fixed content and really delivering it time and time again. So it's really like you want to get people tuned into, let's say, the laws of the country. When you took a driving test, you are learning the same content over and over again. So whether I learned it today or somebody came in to learn it a week later, they would get the same content. That's training for you. Learning is a lot more fluid. You are connecting the data, you are looking at things which are changing in that world, and you're helping the person make sense of it and translate into a skill. So that's really the way that you are looking at learning. It's a different element altogether.
Awesome. Rishabh, I hope that answers your question. We have a very interesting question, and this is something that I know the answer to, but I would still ask that. Pani asks, I love the doodles that Abhijit makes. How did he develop this skill?
Oh, funny. You know, I think I think it's something that I've always done little cartoons and things at the back of my school notebook. So I would always get pulled up for doing something like that. The advantage of let me try and see while I'm talking to you if I can pull out some. So this is how I take notes. This is a typical thing in my notebook. Okay, so
Sure.
so what happens is any page that it's this is the way that the notes are there. So I'll
Oh,
scribble those notes, and because now when I sort of look at it, it gives me the ability to anything. I mean, each one of them is like that. When you start to think visually, visuals are a great way of organizing your ideas. So I would sort of really start to do those visuals. And I so initially I used to do stick figures because some of them are not all that necessarily great and very elaborate. But when I would sort of do my own when I would run a workshop, I would develop slides, and I would, instead of
hmm.
putting text, which people find it difficult, I would use graphics. So these sketches, I would do a cartoon, I would do something. People remember those. Therefore, it gave made it easy for people to benefit from those sketches. And then I kind of thought that okay, as I'm writing, I would so initially I would write for newspaper columns. Many of them, they have their own cartoonist or in-house illustrator, and I would always find it not so satisfying to see that illustration because it wouldn't exactly be
Yeah.
what I would have had in mind. So I found it much easier. So in future, what I decided is I'm going to give not just the article but also an illustration. So initially the newspapers didn't take it. Then on one day, the editor called me and said, "We'll take it, but we are not going to pay you separately for that." So I said, "That's fine. It's my own article and my own illustration. That's fine." So, but what that started to do was to, then I would do it on my blog, and they just started doing it as a natural part of everything that I do. You do more of it, you get a little better. So I think and then your style evolves. Then I would do cartoons in the middle of the entire thing. Sometimes I would do the cartoons separately. Sometimes, like for example, for the newsletter I'm going to do day after tomorrow, um, I'm going to figure out that okay, I've done a lot of sketch notes in the recent times. Let me do a caricature on this, in a large scale caricature of someone. So I think those are ways in which you continuously evolve what you are doing. And so I get very bored with what I do. If I did it two, three times in continuation, I would get bored. So I would want to do something different. So I think that's the uh, best part about, doing what I do.
Lovely. Funny says, I use one of his doodles on the algorithm for innovation and entrepreneurial mindset, starting from
Thank you.
curiosity, imagination, and creativity in one of my own presentations for future skills that I conduct for college students. Thanks a ton for the inspiration, Abhijit. So thank you,
Oh, thank
Funny,
you.
for
Thank you so
asking that
much.
as well.
Feel free to use any of those. They are for you to use. Yeah, I always say that if you're a subscriber, it's for you to use. That's my way of
Right.
saying thank you to you. So please use them in all your presentations.
Wonderful. I have a question, which is also something that Kanish Gupta has asked is how can one create experience map for career transition? Now, I want to tag on to that question and refer to your book where you describe the 6 skills for
Mhm.
careers 3.0. Do you want to delve deeper into that and share a bit more about why is that important for the future of work and what should
Mhm.
people do to be relevant?
Yeah, sure. Um, Thank you very much for that question. Um, I think when you look at it, the 6 skills that I talk about, these are general skills that apply to any job that you are doing. If you are going to create new career opportunities for yourself, um, sometimes one of the ways to sort of really think about it is how can you learn what you've never been taught. That's your first skill. And let me give you an example of that. I used to do a lot of work with the radio. So I started with All India Radio and I did some work for them for years together, and it was never, I mean, the payment was nothing very exciting, but it built a deep skill in me in terms of really beginning to understand how does this medium work. So radio and television were really early places where, when I started my career, I used to do a lot of work for them. But so when podcasting became a thing, technology evolved to create podcasts like what we are doing. And initially, if you remember, podcast basically meant audio only.
Audio. Yeah.
And yeah, so now, video is in everything. So podcast also has adapted. So it becomes easy for me to build on the skill of the radio. At that point of time, if I had said, what's the point of doing this, because there's no money in this, I would have lost out on the opportunity. But because I did so much of that, or I did so much of the drawings and doodles, you have to when you build a skill, don't start by looking at it in a utilitarian way and say,
Mm.
"Faida kya hai? What's the point of doing this? Who's going to use it?" Your opportunities will evolve over time, and it'll evolve in an exponential way. Now, so today, I obviously use it in all my professional work, um, but it's also something that I do for my personal enjoyment. I love drawing, and I kind of continuously I'm doing those. So my work and my hobby or something is not different. So how do you teach yourself what you have never been taught formally? Picking up new skills. Two, once you know it, how do you teach others? So why is that important? Because that's the only way that skill really becomes a deep part of you. So until you are able to do it, and by that it means you don't use any of the notes that you learned yourself from. You create your own version. So that's your second skill. The third skill is, how do you learn to tell stories? Because your storytelling skill is an extremely important way of simplifying something. So stories help you make sense. For example, I can tell you I tell you it's very important to be innovative, think of creative ways to solve problems, you must find ways, opportunities around you. You will not remember any of this. If I tell you there is a story of a thirsty crow who came in on a summer day, and dropped a pebble in a pitcher, and the water level rose. And now you see, as I'm doing it, that story is bringing back a memory of something you've heard years back. Chances are that you don't remember the presentation that you saw last week, but you'll remember this story, which you may have read when you are 3 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, whatever time you read it at, and that visual will stay in your head. So that's the power of the visual. So storytelling is very important. Fourth is, how do you build a personal brand? So which is that, how do you leverage your first three skills to stand out and differentiate yourself in the workplace? The fifth skill is, how do you navigate different ecosystems? So as you have different industries, interests, the world is going to become more multidisciplinary. So how do I, as a HR person, specialize in talent management but have an interest in the media, like podcasts and broadcasts and social media, and in writing, which is a different workplace altogether, and in so all these things come together as you navigate that. My interest in music, you combine these little things to continuously create opportunities for yourself. Yeah. So that's how do you navigate ecosystems. And the final thing is, how do you start thinking like a venture capitalist in terms of your skills and your opportunities? So some skills, if you build 10 skills, all 10 skills will not give you great returns on day one. Maybe one out of those 10 skills will become really powerful to create an opportunity for you. The other 9 skills, some will grow in future, like my example of the radio skill, which is now in podcasting. But also, think about some of the skills will just die away because they've become irrelevant. Some of them become commoditized. You don't ever write in your resume that I know how to use Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. I know how to use a mobile. That's become commoditized. Everybody knows how to use it. So how do you build a portfolio of skills and opportunities for yourself? So these are the 6 skills through which you sort of do that. Maybe I should run a workshop,
You should.
and put that together. So yeah, Gopal, if you just have to now invite me, and I'll come over to run the workshop So,
Absolutely,
with all
absolutely.
your fans.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would be great because at the end of the day, it's everything that's in everybody's mind. But as they always say this, right? Someone has to ask that question for the response to come out in a manner that would make sense. And I think I'm just doing that job here today. Dear friend Mrinal Krant says, Namaskar, Dada. So, hi, Mrinal. And Shaili says, absolutely loving this part. Learning a skill never goes waste. So,
Thank you, Shelley.
thank you. Thank you, Shaili. And one more comment. Thank you for the great insights, Abhijit Bhaduri. Love your thought on opportunities will evolve with time. Loving it, Gopal. Thank
Thank
you,
you, Neetu.
Neetu. Really appreciate that. So I know. I mean, if I were to continue chatting, we can go on for hours because that's the depth of this topic and your experience and knowledge in this particular expertise, rather. But I will switch gears now, and I'll probably take it to the rapid fire questions, which I don't think I had given you any kind of preempt um, idea that would happen today. So the first question, apart from all the books that you have written yourself, what is your favorite book?
My favorite book is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. Um, I mean, it itself. I mean, the title itself is so intriguing that one should definitely go and read it. What's your morning routine?
To go for a long walk and listen to podcasts, and then drink lots of coffee.
Wonderful. One inspirational leader you have ever met.
I have met so many of them. I'm at a loss to choose anyone. You know, I I think I would answer that by saying that I've been inspired by different interactions with people. Many of them are, well, there's some, I've been fortunate to meet some really great names. Everybody recognizes them. But I've also been equally inspired by the ordinary person's conversation. Somebody, uh, traveling somewhere to a city, traveling in the auto and chatting with the auto driver. That's been a great source of the opportunity and learning. I once spent an entire night stranded in a very small town, and I spent the time on a railway station many years back, pre-mobile days, and spent the time chatting with a sadhu. It was like
Wow.
an amazing experience to do that. So I think I've been inspired. And inspiration is a daily act. It's not a
Yeah.
once in a while thing. Sorry,
Yeah.
that was not meant to be such a long answer, but please.
That's
Sorry.
okay. Best piece of career advice that you've ever received, and this could be a long answer, of course.
So, chase your curiosity. Don't chase your passion. I mean, I think there's a worst piece of advice people will give you is, chase your passion and follow your passion. And you get passionate once you build the skill. So once you build the skill, your passion will happen. If you don't know how to draw, it's very hard to feel passionate about drawing. You can have an interest in drawing, strong interest. Doesn't mean you have the ability to continue, but you're good at it. You will start to enjoy that whole process. So then you become passionate. You really enjoy it. Then you don't have to be told that, have you drawn today? So then that is passion for you.
One tech tool you can't live without.
The mobile.
Through that, I think that's true for everybody in times like these. And one bold prediction for future of work.
We are going to see less of jobs and more of individual entrepreneurs. So, expect to see a lot more opportunities of that. So that's the world I would prepare for, because jobs will keep shrinking. As I said, it'll get broken into tasks, and every task is an entrepreneurial opportunity. So
True.
think of yourself of all the tasks that you can do, each one of them is an entrepreneurial opportunity. So when you have a job, your salary comes from one employer, so that's you get one paycheck.
Yeah.
When you are self-employed or you are an entrepreneur, then your salary comes from every customer that you get. So therefore, if imagine Microsoft or Google or any of these companies, they have millions of customers, so their paycheck comes from millions of people. So even if somebody gives them a small amount, it adds up to trillions. So that's, I think, the way to think about yourself, that you can be a trillionaire if your work actually touches the lives of many more people. So I think that's the prediction, that's the direction in which we'll go. So
Right. And I can't resist but ask this question to you because Mrinal has put it on the chat. Any OTT platform project in pipeline, Abhijit? You have acted in a few movies, as you mentioned earlier.
you know my I would love to do that. So the last web series I acted in was Half Pants Full Pants. It's on Amazon Prime. I acted with Irfan and the film Apna Asman, and I've done lots of theater. I'm hoping that through the popularity of this uh, platform that Gopal has offered me, I'm going to get some opportunities to
Few
act
more
in something
calls.
else. So, so at this point of time, there's nothing that anybody has asked me for, and I'm hoping that somebody will. And so, Mrinal, if you know any director who's looking to cast me, I'm right there.
Lovely. And the author in you that keeps writing so many books, any upcoming book that we can
Yeah,
hope to see soon?
contemplating. So, what I'm really doing right now is two projects. One is to translate this Career 3.0 workshop, so to do it as a workshop, which is what I have created. This is what I'm running for people. And to actually then work on the other part of it, which is, what are ways in which the same process, because this is going to be a huge area of opportunity. So that's one kind of work which is happening. On the other side, sort of really, I think I have not written fiction for a long time. I want to go back to writing fiction. So far, I've been using fiction in the blog posts and all of that in the
Blog post,
newsletters,
yeah.
but just to write pure play stories. So that's what I want to try now.
Wonderful. We'll keep waiting to see that book come out pretty soon. Abhijit, it was absolute pleasure chatting with you, and thanks to everyone who joined this and made this even more engaging conversation. Any parting thoughts for the audience?
No, thank you so much. I want to say thanks to you, Gopal. I mean, I'm so delighted to be here with you on this platform. Thanks to everybody who's joined in, and appreciate seeing old friends through opportunities like this. And I hope you stay in touch with me. And my email is abhijitbhaduri@live.com. That's my first and last name together at live.com. Or, of course, on LinkedIn, my newsletter. I look forward to that. Uh, we'll stay in touch.
Wonderful. So, thank you very much, everyone who joined us today, and also probably who will listen to this later on YouTube and Spotify as well. Um, I hope that Abhijit's insights and stories have inspired you to rethink, reinvent, and future proof your career. As Abhijit emphasized, control the controllables. Don't just follow your passion. You may be wondering what did I just say? But as Abhijit said, follow your curiosity, expand your peripheral vision, and build your skills. Passion will follow. Careers are rarely love at first sight, and you have to be good at something to truly enjoy it. These are all the quotes that I'm sharing from the book. We live in interesting times where jobs are going to get lesser and lesser. Traditional jobs are going to go away, but there is always plenty of work in there. Start thinking about skills and find your own niche to move forward. Stay inspired, stay curious, and join us next week for yet another episode of Career Shifts podcast. Until then, keep shifting forward and upward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.